Welcome to the MEND, a podcast to learn about services and support for victims and survivors of crime, sponsored through the Center for Crime Victim Services here in Vermont. I'm Anna Nassett, and I'm your host of this bi-monthly podcast and show. Today on the show from Ohio, we have Dr. Ronnie Gladden to talk to us about Pride Month, the LGBTQ plus community, and trauma. Welcome, Ronnie.
Well, thank you for having me, Anna.
Absolutely.
Happy Pride.
Yes, indeed. Happy Pride. So as we know, the show was created to take a deeper look at services, organizations, and concepts for victims and survivors of crime. We want to always acknowledge our healing process and provide resources not only in our state of Vermont, but throughout the country that could benefit victims of crime as they begin to mend. I always like to start and begin with a trigger warning. Our goal is to create a safe place to discuss topics of healing. But with that in mind, we may occasionally hear a story related to crime, discuss our mental health, or have sensitive subject matter. We urge you to take care of yourself and listen at your own discretion. So as I said, I'm honored to have Dr. Ronnie Gladden here from Ohio today, my own home state. He is a motivational speaker, actor, author, and tenured professor. With at-risk teens and young adults prove successful with improving educational and equity outcomes. Dr. Ronnie implemented a critical diversity and inclusion training curriculum and dynamic speaking series boasting national and international cultural figures across multiple campuses within the college system. His work is centered on fostering identity reconciliation, empowerment, and independent representation via authentic, transformative, and diversity leadership practices for global impact. Welcome, Ronnie.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
For sure.
So can you want to start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself and what called you into this work over the years?
Absolutely. So you mentioned I'm from Ohio, specifically from Cincinnati. And what I like is that there's been kind of this renaissance in the city where there are more businesses or stadiums that are being built. There's more hustle and bustle in the city. We were just talking about that. And I feel like I'm kind of coming alive myself a bit too with that. My life is speeding up, and that's because of wanting to help other people. I feel more like it's something I've been pulled into rather than necessarily being intentional about approaching it. It's just the background of my life, of having a good life, but also having some domestic disturbances as well too. And the more that I looked into that, I saw that that's unfortunately common, and it's in a lot of varying degrees. And it doesn't necessarily make a difference, if one is more traumatized than someone else. Just the fact of being exposed to any level of domestic terrorism or bullying or having identity issues or what have you can for sure throw someone into a traumatic cycle. And so I think it's worthy of talking about that. So that's kind of how I'm in this, and I've been lucky to process it through the arts and academics and whatnot, just kind of in an interdisciplinary way. So I'm hoping that maybe others are wanting to converse in that same manner.
Awesome. I like what you had to say about it. Wasn't so much I decided, I was more pulled into this work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the common vein for so many of us. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm in this work now. Okay. I'm not sure quite how I got here. I understand. I understand it, but like, oh, okay, this is where we're going. And I love that. So it's Pride Month, and happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
And to everyone listening.
Yes.
So in mind, can you share with us some of the challenges that exist right now for the LGBTQ plus people and population in your state, nationally, globally, however we want to go around that?
Absolutely. I think what's happening here in Ohio is very similar to what's happening around the country and perhaps even around the globe, especially in a lot of the countries that are not as progressive. I mean, we know that there still are hundreds of countries that have some level of ban against LGBTQ plus life, or not recognizing gender identity, not recognizing same-sex marriages, relationships, what have you. So it's all over. I'd say that one of the issues is having a reversal of the progress, you know? I mean, it was just in 2015 that marriage equality became the law of the land here in the States. And there were some LGBTQ plus entities that actually shut down shortly after because they thought mission accomplished. And then here we are just 7 years later, fighting for an adjacent issue, reproductive rights, fighting also to be on sports teams, fighting also to have pronouns recognized, fighting also still to educate individuals about this identity. You know, we respect the sensibilities of other people. This isn't to change someone's dogma or to proselytize whatever you are when you are, but we want to stamp out the hate. You know, when you do better working with those that are marginalized, you can do better in general with working with the masses. This is about the dignity and the worth of people. So I think one of the challenges right now is to reclaim a lot of the progress and the momentum that was there in 2012, 13, 14, and that culminated in 2015 with marriage equality. And then some of the goodwill that also happened in 2016, 2017. But now there are these reversals. So given that we're still grappling with the pandemic, given inflation, you know, given violence, all these things. And by the way, that's where I also think is interconnected too. All of this hate that's fomented, that's used conveniently in a political season. It's a culture war. That same hate that you're seeing in mass shootings and road rage and all these things, I think is interwoven with what's going on with the LGBTQ. So you find these enemies and cause divisions, and then we don't get a lot of things done. So I think the struggle right now is to be seen and to still grapple with the systemic issues of suicidality, you know, of home insecurity, of food insecurity, you know, managing other kinds of like sexual and reproductive health matters. So it's a lot of layers, you know, it's a lot that's going on. So yes, it's good that Pride Month is spotlighting all of this, but even one of I think the interim HRC president is saying that there is a crisis right now, and it's in large part because of what I've just described. So it's kind of bittersweet at this moment to celebrate, to be triumphant over what has been attained in terms of progress, but then it's like there's a lot of headwinds right now.
Absolutely. I wrote down like the reversal of progress. And I mean, that really, I do think sums it up. And just, I've even, you know, felt bittersweet this month as well, just being like, wow, there's so much to celebrate, but there's just so much of interwovenness to all of the hatred that's happening right now in this country.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have to be able to grieve along with celebrate. And for me, like that's what helps push movements forward. But there has to be that acknowledgement of the pain and suffering that's happening to so many people. How do you feel like allies and general public should be showing up right now for the LGBTQ plus community, or can be showing up?
I think a lot of the die-in-the-wool allies will continue to do what they've always done, and that's to show up in the support groups, that's to volunteer for national hotlines and be there on the phone to help that LGBTQ plus person, especially a youth that may be homeless and they want a helping hand, help out with a meal, you know, help out with any other kind of just like human connection. So I think that will continue. I think for others, it's to recognize that in helping this marginalized group, you're helping more than just that. You're helping yourself. You're helping with social lubrication. You're helping with sustaining the humanity. I mean, there's a lot that's being frayed right now, you know? I mean, I mentioned the shootings before, especially at Uvalde in Texas. And, you know, there's a serious reality check that we need, you know, if we're going to let our children perish. There's no future, without them, which is obvious, but it needs to be stated. And I know that is a different issue at face value, but I think underneath it, it still connects with what we're talking about here. That's a vulnerable population, perhaps even marginalized in some ways. And I see the connection with the LGBTQ plus. So it's about refining the sensibility. So any ally that wants to do that, that's good. And I get it. I get that people right now are trying to fill up their tank. They're trying to make sure they don't have any blackouts because of a strained grid. I get it. Out west, it's like, we just want some water.
Yep.
Because lakes and things are drying up. So I get that there are environmental concerns, financial concerns. I get that people are still reeling and maybe having to grapple with, all right, returning back to work, after being able to work from home, because of a pandemic. So I get there are other things on the list. So I don't want to, be so flip and think that this has to be the center of everyone's universe. But, I do think that, again, these are interconnected, socially significant issues. And so you do right by here, it extends in other places, and we can begin solving some other like systemic problems that affect the elderly, that affect teens, that affect people of color, BIPOC, that affect people with ability, accessibility issues. There's a golden thread that goes through it all. So an ally, to sum it up, just to show up in balance with whatever else that you're managing at home, where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if anything, for people who have not done work on that ally front, to just remember that like 2015 did not solve everything. It's not like, okay, we're good now. We can focus on to something else. Like, no, this is still very, very relevant, and we have to be showing up however we can. Since we do a lot of victim providers that listen here, and I'll speak specifically to Vermont, very sadly, we had a beautiful trans woman who was murdered here just a couple months ago, who worked somewhat in this field as well. How can victim service providers take into account and respond when working with the LGBTQ plus community? What are the different things that they should be thinking about when they have someone who's coming in that's either been assaulted or sexually assaulted or a victim of a hate crime? How can they take that into account and provide better services?
I think that for those that are mental health professionals, those that are providing the victim services, that they need to strike a balance between the statistics and models and frameworks and that individual person. Yes, you need to be trained. You need to be more than just, a sympathetic ear, for sure. You need to be more than just responding, from an emotional place. You need to be informed. But at the same time, that's a person, they have a specific story, and you need to take that into consideration. What's appropriate? Sometimes what may be placed inside of a framework may not exactly, it can be useful, but you also still want to just balance the humanity as well too. Getting someone comfortable, getting them stabilized, making sure that they are out of danger, and finding a way to break the interlocking cycles of oppression wherever that is. So that may be helping them to relocate, out of a dangerous environment, making sure that ultimately they're going to be able to be empowered and be able to have the agency where they can have the locus of control, as opposed to it being with someone else, and they're always going to have to go and get that help. So stabilizing and allowing for that person to still have self-determination while also guiding them, through the crisis. So more of the guide on the side and less of the sage on the stage.
Yes, absolutely. I always say the more that you give us voice and choice, the more you give us empowerment, which is going to give us to start to heal and to get away from that whole I'm going to save this person who's coming in, is so
Right.
important to take away from that savior complexity, no matter who you're working with. I think it's just
Exactly.
so huge. But yeah, that voice and choice is just what I think is so important. And I hear you reflecting that as well.
Yeah. Voice and choice. I like that.
So to kind of shift gears a little bit, but stay in this vein, can you share with our listeners about your work within cultural competency and just kind of a little overview of what that is for folks who may not know and what the work you're doing to educate people?
Absolutely. So with cultural competency, it's not about telling people how to live their lives, you know, but it's about showing other perspectives so that they may be able to enrich their lives while also helping others to do the same. So it's about creating a culture that is more inclusive, that respects diversity, and it respects it so it can coexist and not compete with each other. So that's kind of a summation there. And some of that work I do as a professor. So I advise the LGBTQ plus group. And with that, we talk statistics, we talk stories. We have a Brave Conversation series, which is similar, like a TED Talk. It's like a quasi TED Talk where students, and this recent semester, we had a faculty member, they bare their soul. They tell a little bit of their story in the right dosage, in the way that's appropriate, where they're comfortable. They share it in the auditorium. We invite people from the college, students, staff, faculty to attend. We've even had some community members. And it has been so successful. After each Brave Conversation event, there's someone that comes up to me that says, oh, I want to say this, I want to say that, and we have had allies now. So that's a part of that. I'll share my story, you share yours, and we begin to make a synthesis out of it and like tear down some of those walls where we demystify what folks are like. Because right now there's so much propaganda that's out there, and projection and stereotypes that it's just driving all of this hate. So that's a part of what I do, and that's how I see it. So yeah, it's to enrich one's life. I like the quote that I'm not here to add years to my life, but I'm here to add life to my years, and that's what I want to intertwine with the cultural competency.
Love that. And you really you spoke to like the healing power of storytelling, which is such a passion of mine. It's just that when we allow people to tell their stories and we deeply listen in and we actually listen, how much we can learn and find the connections we have with others. It's just so important to have that, and that component of listening within storytelling, I think, is something I kind of heard a theme come out of yours as well.
Oh, for sure. And it fits nicely with authentic leadership. So anyone that wants a framework, and I study that. So authentic leadership, feeding into transformational leadership, creative leadership. And you heard me talk a little bit about those frameworks before, but for anyone that wants to look it up in a packaged theoretical framework, there you go.
Love it. Thank you. So many tools. Thank you. We're covering a lot of things because Ronnie is an expert in a lot of things. So we're just kind of doing a big overview of his work today. So let's shift gears and let's talk about trauma. What work are you doing to educate people on trauma? And what do you think victim service providers should take into account in regards to trauma? Not only in who they are working with, not only the person coming into their office, but also the trauma that mounts on us in doing this work. Because if you're doing this work, if you're an advocate or law enforcement or a prosecutor, you're taking on a lot of trauma as well.
Sure.
So how can we better equip ourselves other than just the kind of throw out there, take a walk and meditate, which are all great things, but the other side of that, of really like accounting for that?
Yeah. So the second part of the question, how can you as a provider keep your cup full?
Yeah.
How do you do that? And that's effectively asking, how does one spell relief? You know? And so that's going to look very differently. And yes, for some people, they do spell relief, WALK, where they're going to take a walk through nature. So obviously keep doing that if that works, or it is, meditating. I won't go ahead and spell all that out, but meditating, it can be that. But another way for relief for other folks, it could be engineering one's day in such a way that they have time to have pressure release. Pressure release valve can be switched on, and that's going to look different for every person. So for someone that's a morning person, obviously lean into that, because if you're able to say, I thrive by waking up at 4:30. Dolly Parton says that she wakes up at that time and that's a still time in the morning, and she gets so much done and she's writing songs and doing things. So if one is able to start early and do a lot of heavy lifting, other parts of their lives, whatever that may look like, they can get things done and be efficient, be industrious. They may find that they have more of a reserve. Their cup is able to be more full because they'll know that when they are working with other people, they are more available because they have managed other areas in their lives. And for someone else, if getting that early doesn't work for you, then you find the time that it does, and other responsibilities that you have in your life, you make sure that you go to that quiet place like Dolly Parton spoke about, and you do that. Or if you're the opposite, if you're like a Stephen King, we've talked about this in some of my writing classes, he likes to go into his room, shut the door, blast some AC/DC and some Metallica, and have some Code Red, Mountain Dew. I mean, some people like their Red Bull. I don't know if they like Bang, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't recommend that, just some of all that caffeine. But if that works for you and it's healthy for you, go and do that and do it. And that's your pressure release valve. So I would say keep your signature. That's a part of one's signature. Keep your signature and find a way to be able to write that signature throughout the day, because otherwise, we just can't do it. No matter if we are working with those that are traumatized, or if you have kids, or if you're caretaking for other folks, you have to have a jubilee time at some point, and that's going to look different. So keep the signature is what I would say for that. In terms of what I'm doing for trauma, so I'm partnering like here with you and with CCBS individuals, because I know that many of you are more steeply trained in mental health work. Now, I do have social science degrees. I've worked in mental health services. I'll continue to do that as a professor of English composition. There's plenty of that. We bring in the ACE score or the ACE tests and get those scores. We have all sorts of professional development trainings. We have outreach programs. People write and process in their essays their truth. So I am a champion for that, with the expressive writing. I mentioned write hard and clear about what hurts. I said that in my presentation. That's a quote from Ernest Hemingway. So I'm a champion and proponent for that in terms of processing trauma in the creative arts, in performing arts, academic. So that's how I'm looking at it. But yeah, we all need a jubilee time, and keep the signature.
I love that so much. Thank you. And that resonates with me, like just like a little personal note. I'm just coming off of like a major speaking tour, and I was burnt. And I just took like the last couple days to just kind of be really quiet. And the presence I feel with you today, I was like, I am so glad I had those quiet moments to release my valve, to have my little jubilee, so that I can be present and fully engaged in this work again. Because I was definitely kind of on that level of just going. And I think we just get into that place. And also thank you for always mentioning Dolly Parton, because you don't know that I have a little 3-legged chihuahua right across the room from me, whose name is Dolly Parton. So Thanks for connecting with Dolly.
Of course. And we were talking about Columbus before. And so, Jenny's ice cream started there. And there was that Dolly Parton flavor that
Yes,
just sold out.
absolutely.
Did you get any?
I didn't get any, but I really
Okay.
wanted to.
Yeah, I did too. And it was always, it was always sold out. And
Yeah.
they're saying that it's so hard to make because it's like, those special ingredients that you just can't do it. But I didn't know you were. Who doesn't love Dolly? Who
Who
doesn't?
doesn't love Dolly? The queen. The queen.
The queen, for sure.
Sorry, maybe I just need to do a podcast on like the healing efforts of Dolly Parton.
We should, you know what? Let's plan that at some point. Yeah, we'll have to come back and do that for sure.
Our listeners are like, y'all are on a tangent and I'm loving it because
I've got some Dolly quotes and you've got yours. Yeah, we got some fun with that.
Oh yeah, I've got my Dolly book right behind me.
Oh, okay.
There's Dolly candles. There's all sorts of Dolly stuff around here. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. Now,
listeners, stay tuned for a Dolly Parton episode.
Yeah, let's do that. Now, have you? Was your tour pretty extensive around the country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. We'll chat about that offline. But yeah, okay. Just that kind of thing of just we have to be able to find those moments, and maybe it is listening to Dolly Parton on your way to work, whatever it is, like just a moment that like recenters you and re-energizes you is so huge. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing that with everyone. And yes, everyone stay tuned for Dolly Parton episode.
Sure.
So as we start to wind down today, for you, like you've shared a lot of ways in which people can, process their trauma, begin healing, looking at all these different things, but what has your healing journey looked like? And how do you make space to still heal while being involved in this work? And how have you kind of fully come into your own self? I know a lot of that's through writing, but if you just kind of want to share what that looks like and even tell us about the book that you have coming out.
Absolutely. Well, so this, for the last 15 years, I've been in a minor oblivion, I guess you could say. I saw a lot of friendships kind of just naturally contract and run its course. And even some of the professional work that I did, I saw that happen as well too. And I grew up as an only child. So ultimately, I found myself alone more than usual. So I'm more accustomed already to having a pretty good deal of space because of growing up as an only child. But this last 15 years has been unlike anything else. And so at first it was like, all right, this is even too much time even for me. So let me just kind of have the regular diversions. You go out, you go have a drink, you go to the club, go to the bar, you go see some folks, whatever it is. And that just was not satisfying anymore. And it just compounded being alone. So at some point, I recognized that, all right, there's a purpose for why so many relationships and so many categories in my life have left me to reflect in ways long term. So I started to work with that instead of work against it. So not only have I been writing, but there have been years of working with counselors, psychotherapists, a psychiatrist, and that actually started all the way back in 2006. And it's been off and on. I had no idea it was going to last that long, but there was a lot to work through in terms of the issues with my father. And that was an issue. Plus, just recognizing that a lot of people are traumatized, but particularly those that are Black appearing in a country founded on the way that it is. There is something called post-traumatic slave syndrome. So looking into that. So the bottom line is looking to be able to better get a psychological grasp on what has bothered me and finding a way to organize it under a rubric, post-traumatic slave syndrome, PTSD, whatever it is, or my own terminology. So that has helped with healing. Of course, the writing, you mentioned the book. And so the book is me having a watershed moment. I said Bearing Souls earlier with the Brave Conversation series. So it wouldn't make any sense for me to encourage others to do that if I'm not doing it myself. And so the book is me, describing that although, yes, I appear in this way, Black and male bodied, that's not what's on the inside. It's the exact opposite, feeling, believe it or not, white and female. That's like an improbable journey, but it's real. And what I've discovered along the way is that there are people that are insistent, consistent, persistent with a similar sort of identity. There's a community on Reddit. There's communities with other people. And so my book is discussing that. And it's looking at telling my journey through dramatic reenactments, dreams, domestic violence, social critique, semi-autobiographical anecdotes, and it provides resources for others. So it's called White Girl Within. But really, it's about embracing our inner diversity. And a lot of us, in one way or another, probably have a kind of intersectionality where we may, in some ways, be the exact opposite of what we appear. So it's the opposite of everything. How do you reconcile that? Especially if it's a radical identity or if you've had a radical experience that puts you in this oppositional sort of a reality. How do you manage that? So that's what the book is doing. So the healing process, I mean, that's ongoing. I think a lot of us are healing. To be born is to be a traumatic experience, and to live is that too. There's a quote from Reverend Parsons. He said this when at the late great Aretha Franklin's funeral, that death doesn't hurt, but life does, and there's all kinds of things we could put into contextualizing that. So this is a lifelong thing. So there's that pressure release valve. So if you need a little bit of bang, just a little bit, go have it. Go have your AC/DC or Lil Nas or whatever you like. So that's a part of my healing journey is bearing my soul a bit, but doing it in a way that's still constructive, not just to just spew it, but to give perspective to other people and challenge notions of identity and the sort. So that's kind of what it looks like. It's still a work in progress, as we all are.
Absolutely. It's got to be a lifetime work in progress, but thank you so much for just being so transparent with our listeners and within your writing and shining light on so many different things. I can't wait to read your book. When is it coming out?
It should be out by October. So that's
Okay.
just in time for LGBTQ plus History Month. So that'll be
Awesome.
fitting.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be giving it a plug, but everyone, it's called The White Girl Within. And you can find that at the White Girl or www.whitegirlwithin.com. So please go there to learn more about that.
Cool.
So kind of in our final minutes here, what are just a few action steps? I don't know if this is like, it's such a big question. I'm going to try and just say, like, what are a few action steps we can all take as society to just improve a little bit along the way? Small things. I don't know. It's a really loaded question, so I apologize.
It is. Well, I think we need to become Jedis. We need the Force to be with us all. And so Jedi would be justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. So that's the acronym. That's Jedi. If we are Jedis, then we're going to be aware of those things. Not necessarily hawkish to the point to where it gets in the way of us living our lives, because I think that's one of the critiques right now of the alphabet people and being woke, is that you're trying to be over-determined and over-delivering a message to other people in terms of what they should do, for a small amount of the population. So it's not over determination, it's not over delivering, but it's just simply being determined, simply being in the space to deliver. And so just be a Jedi. You let the Force be with you, with us, when it needs to be. So if you are seeing someone that could definitely benefit from some justice, you may want to help. That may involve getting the police involved. It may be similar to a teacher or social worker that's a mandated reporter, and if someone's telling you something and it just clearly seems untoward, doesn't seem right, you can go to the authorities in that way. You may quietly give to a worthy cause on GoFundMe and just do it anonymously, whatever you may be able to part with. It could just be a few dollars, but that's a part of a community that you're doing things with. So if you let the force be with you, it can be with us. And I think that's one way to look at it. Yeah, like you said, it is a thorny question. So I guess that's why I had to borrow a bit from Star Wars, because, we had, you needed to summon some kind of, almost otherworldly kind of assistance to help with this, because these are the same kinds of social issues we've been grappling with, for millennia.
Yes. And I think so many of us we can all come into the force. So yes, I love the Jedi. That's something I'm going to remember. It kind of ties into like the bystander prevention work we can do. It's just, I like how you said, like, choose how you respond, choose where you give. Like, you can do these small little things can make such a ripple effect of difference.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Ronnie. It's been just a delight to connect with you. I always like to close the show on just kind of a positive, like 1 sentence or 2 sentence message that you would like to give to our listeners. I asked that weirdly. So yeah, just one small sentence or 2 that you want to like positively say to our listeners as we close.
Absolutely. Embrace the diversity living inside of us in order to embrace the diversity outside of us. Identity rights are human rights.
Love that. Thank you so much. And I know I'm going to remember to do that a little bit more myself. So to learn all about Dr. Ronnie Gladden's work, as I said, you can go to www.whitegirlwithin.com to learn about his upcoming book. And for his speaking and coaching services, you can go to ronniegladden.com, which is RONNIEGLADDEN.com. Thank you again so much for being here today, Ronnie. A pleasure to get to know you, and hopefully I'll get to see you in Ohio sometime.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I want to go to Vermont too. So yeah.
Let's do it. So as always, if you have any questions about the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me, Anna@standupresources.com. Okay. I'm your host for this show. Thank you so much for being here and being listeners on the MEND. Be well, be strong, and goodbye. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review or feedback. We love hearing new topic ideas from listeners and watchers as well. Thank you for listening to The MEND, and be well.